What if the pill you take for inflammation is the very reason it keeps coming back? That sounds extreme, but stay with me. If inflammation were truly the enemy, your body wouldn't create it on purpose. Every time you feel pain, stiffness, swelling, or even brain fog, your body is not attacking you, it's protecting you. Inflammation is a survival response. The real question is, what is it trying to defend you from? Here's the mistake almost everyone makes. They silence the signal. They take ibuprofen. They look for something to reduce inflammation. And for a few hours, it feels better. But that relief is an illusion, because shutting off inflammation without fixing the trigger is like disconnecting the fire alarm while the building is still burning. And this is where it gets powerful. There's a compound in turmeric called curcumin that doesn't just mute symptoms. It interacts with the master switches inside your cells that control inflammatory pathways at the source.
In this video, I'm going to show you why inflammation keeps returning, what's really driving it deep inside your biology, and how to turn it off the smart way, not the temporary way. Are you ready to stop fighting the smoke and finally extinguish the fire? Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Anti-inflammatory drugs don't solve inflammation. They suppress it. And that distinction changes everything. When you take something like ibuprofen, it blocks enzymes called COX-1 and COX-2. These enzymes are involved in producing prostaglandins, chemical messengers that create pain and swelling. So yes, the pain goes down, the swelling may reduce, but the reason your body activated inflammation in the first place, that is still there. It's like lowering the volume of a smoke detector without asking why there's smoke.
The medical system often treats inflammation as the villain, but inflammation is not the disease, it's the response. The real problem is chronic activation. And chronic activation only happens when something deeper keeps triggering the alarm. So what is that something? At the cellular level, inflammation is controlled by master switches, transcription factors like NF-kappa B. Think of NF-kappa B as a control panel inside your cells. When it gets flipped on, your body produces inflammatory chemicals. When it stays on for too long, inflammation becomes chronic. Now here's the part most people miss. NF-kappa B doesn't turn on randomly. It responds to stress signals. Those stress signals often come from blood sugar spikes and insulin resistance, oxidative stress from processed foods and environmental toxins, poor gut health and increased intestinal permeability, chronic psychological stress, excess visceral fat. In other words, inflammation is usually a downstream effect of metabolic stress.
This is why someone can take anti-inflammatory medication for years and still develop heart disease, arthritis, cognitive decline, or autoimmune conditions, because the root trigger, metabolic dysfunction, was never corrected. Now let's talk about curcumin. Unlike ibuprofen, curcumin doesn't just block one enzyme. It interacts upstream. Research shows it can modulate NF-kappa B itself, the master switch. That means instead of simply blocking the inflammatory chemicals after they're produced, it influences the signaling pathways that decide whether to produce them in the first place. That's a fundamentally different strategy. But here's the critical insight. Even curcumin is not a magic bullet. If blood sugar is constantly elevated, if sleep is poor, if stress hormones remain high, the inflammatory switch will keep getting flipped back on.
So the real root cause isn't a lack of anti-inflammatory drugs. It's a lifestyle and metabolic environment that continuously signals danger inside your cells. Until that environment changes, inflammation will always return. And now that you understand that inflammation is a signal, not the enemy, we can go deeper. Now let's go deeper, but I promise to keep this simple. Imagine your body as a high-security building. Inside every cell, there's a control room. And inside that control room, there's a master switch called NF-kappa B.
When this switch is turned on, it sends out orders: produce inflammatory chemicals, recruit immune cells, increase blood flow, prepare for repair. In short, it activates defense mode. In the right situation, like a cut, infection, or injury, this is life-saving. You want inflammation. It isolates the threat, repairs tissue, and restores balance. The problem begins when the switch gets stuck. So what flips it on in the first place? One major trigger is blood sugar spikes. When you eat refined carbohydrates or sugar, your blood glucose rises quickly. Your pancreas releases insulin to move that glucose into cells. But if this happens repeatedly, day after day, your cells start becoming resistant to insulin. Now glucose lingers in the bloodstream longer than it should, and excess glucose is chemically reactive. It binds to proteins in a process called glycation, forming what we call advanced glycation end products, or AGs. Think of AGs as tiny sparks. These sparks generate oxidative stress, unstable molecules called free radicals that damage cell membranes, mitochondria, and even DNA. Your body interprets that damage as danger. And what does danger activate? NF-kappa B. Now layer on another factor: visceral fat. Fat tissue isn't just storage, it's hormonally active, especially the deep abdominal fat surrounding your organs. This tissue releases inflammatory signaling molecules called cytokines. So if someone carries excess visceral fat, they are constantly sending low-grade emergency signals throughout the body. Then there's the gut. Your intestinal lining is designed to be selectively permeable, allowing nutrients in, keeping toxins and bacteria out. But chronic stress, ultra-processed foods, alcohol, and certain medications can disrupt this barrier. When the gut lining becomes more permeable, sometimes called leaky gut, bacterial fragments like LPS, lipopolysaccharides, can enter the bloodstream. Your immune system sees LPS and immediately reacts. Once again, NF-kappa B turns on. Now add chronic psychological stress. When you're under constant stress, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline. Short-term, that's adaptive. Long-term, elevated stress hormones impair mitochondrial function and increase oxidative stress, which once again activates inflammatory pathways. Notice the pattern? Blood sugar instability, oxidative stress, visceral fat, gut permeability, chronic stress. Different triggers, same switch. Inflammation is not random. It is the final common pathway of metabolic stress. Now here's where curcumin becomes interesting. Curcumin has been shown to interact with multiple signaling pathways, including NF-kappa B, COX-2, and various inflammatory cytokines. Instead of blocking just one enzyme, it influences the regulatory network. Think of it as calming the control room instead of cutting the wires to the alarm. But even that only works effectively if the incoming danger signals are reduced. Because if the building keeps detecting smoke, the alarm will continue to sound. And this is why managing inflammation requires more than just a supplement. It requires changing the signals your cells are receiving every single day. Now that you understand the mechanism, the next step is practical. Now let's make this practical. If inflammation is a signal and NF-kappa B is the master switch, then your job is simple. Reduce the danger signals that keep flipping that switch on. Here's exactly how to do that. Number 1, stabilize your blood sugar. This is foundational. Start by removing refined carbohydrates and added sugars. That means cutting back on soda, pastries, white bread, ultra-processed snacks, and sugary coffee drinks. Build your meals around protein, healthy fats, fiber, and whole foods. When you eat protein and fiber first, you blunt the glucose spike. Add resistance training and daily walking. Muscle is a glucose sponge. The more muscle you have, the better your insulin sensitivity. Stable blood sugar equals fewer inflammatory sparks. Number 2, reduce visceral fat. You cannot out-supplement excess visceral fat. Focus on improving metabolic health, not just losing weight. Prioritize sleep, 7 to 8 hours per night. Chronic sleep deprivation increases insulin resistance and hunger hormones.
Incorporate strength training at least 3 times per week. Combine that with daily movement. Visceral fat is metabolically active, but it responds quickly when insulin levels improve. Lower visceral fat means fewer inflammatory cytokines circulating through your system. Number 3, support your gut barrier. Your gut lining is one of your most important defense systems. Eliminate ultra-processed foods and excessive alcohol. Consider fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, or kimchi to support microbial diversity. Increase soluble fiber from vegetables, berries, legumes, and chia seeds. Fiber feeds beneficial gut bacteria, which produce short-chain fatty acids that help maintain intestinal integrity. A stronger gut barrier means fewer inflammatory triggers entering your bloodstream. Number 4, manage oxidative stress. This is where curcumin can play a role, but as part of a system. Include colorful vegetables daily: leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, berries, turmeric, ginger. These provide polyphenols and antioxidants that neutralize free radicals. But remember, antioxidants work best when you stop overproducing free radicals in the first place. That means reducing processed food intake and improving metabolic flexibility. Number 5, control chronic stress. You cannot ignore this. Chronic psychological stress keeps inflammatory pathways activated. Incorporate daily stress regulation, deep breathing, walking in sunlight, resistance training, journaling, or mindfulness practice. Even 10 minutes of controlled breathing can reduce sympathetic nervous system dominance. Notice what we did not do. We did not fight inflammation. We removed the reasons your body keeps turning it on. When you change the signals, the switch calms down naturally. And that is how you address inflammation at its root. Now, here's something important. If chronic inflammation is driven by blood sugar instability and insulin resistance, then you cannot fully understand inflammation without understanding metabolic health. Because insulin resistance is the silent driver behind heart disease, fatty liver, cognitive decline, and even accelerated aging. And if you haven't watched my video about insulin resistance and how it silently damages your body, I've placed that video right here. Check it out. It will connect everything you learned today and take this to the next level.